Hi guys, my name is Nick Broughton and I'm a Randomfish. Hit the subscribe button and let's all be Randomfishes together, shall we? I have been racking my brain for the past week about what it is I want to review. I haven't had anything up this week so far, not out of a lack of wanting to put something out to you guys, but just not knowing what to really talk about. My Shadowhunters Part 1 and Part 2 review that I've now done was something that I just wanted to sort of get over with and get done with. The problem is that when I start something, I like to finish it, and at the moment I'm halfway through quite a lot of stuff. So I instead wanted to take a look at something that I've already watched multiple times now, and I wanted to talk about that. Today, I would like to talk about, put very simply, I'd like to talk about Monty Python. Or more specifically, Monty Python's Flying Circuses. A show that was released, I believe, in the 60s or 70s. This show changed comedy for a lot of people. It changed your perception of comedy. It changed how you wanted to do comedy for those people who would end up emulating them through their own work. And of course, it would pave the way for surreal, no punchline humor. The kind of humor that would eventually give birth to the likes of, say, awkward comedy, like what we would get in The Office, years later. And while I have gone on record as saying that I'm not a fan of awkward comedy, I will say that I enjoy Monty Python. And I understand where the comedy came from. I understand why it came out of this. Describing Monty Python is a little bit like it's a little bit like assuming people don't know the story of the life of Jesus. Or the story of Christmas. It's just this incredibly weird thing that people seem to, maybe not all over the whole world, but a lot of people in the world seem to know the story of. So I'm not really going to bore you with the story of Python. If you have a Netflix account, do check out The Truth-ish, Almost the Truth, I should say. A documentary series that I think is about 6 episodes long, I believe, 6 episodes. Which is filled to the brim with interviews from the Pythons themselves, as well as comedians from before and after, their friends, and other such members of the public, describing not only Python's rise, but also how they maintain themselves and how what they're still doing today. Unfortunately, we also did lose another Python not that long ago, Terry Jones. He is unfortunately gone as well, so that's now Graham Chapman and Terry Jones are now both gone. Which is actually very weird. It's weird. I feel like the best way to describe both Graham Chapman and Terry Jones at this point would be, Chapman is the kind of man who you would have eventually seen on stage doing Shakespeare. I could see him doing something from The Tempest, or a big dramatic Macbeth speech. See him play Macbeth, actually, that would be even cooler. But Terry Jones, I'm afraid, I was watching Almost the Truth. I've watched it a few times now. I've got it on DVD just as much as I've got it available for streaming on Netflix, but I was watching the DVD not that long ago, and I'm sorry, but the favouriteest thing ever that I've ever heard when it comes to Terry Jones is John Cleese's impression of him. When he uses the phrase, "Guys, yeah, I really, really feel..." Literally it. He doesn't say anything else. That's how he describes Jones. That's how he describes Terry Jones. And it throws me through a loop every single time. It makes me laugh so much. But what I will say when it comes to the Flying Circus, I understand why people don't always get it. especially in today's climate, due to the fact that it's mostly just memorable quotes and random assorted sketches. It's no surprise, really, that again, on Netflix, you have access to Flying Circus, the complete run of Flying Circus, but you also have Personal Best, you have the Monty Python live performances as well, you have their movies as well, apart from And Now for Something Completely Different. I'm guessing that's a pretty standard reason as to why. It has all these various things across the board that really do work and really do sort of give you that idea of what it is that you really want from these characters and what you want from this setup. But again, talking about what Monty Python does or their members is very weird to me, because talking about Python is a gigantic ball that has yet to be popped, that's filled with all these little nuggets, all these little random quotes, or people very loudly shouting down the street, "Bama!" or "Welcome to the Ministry of Silly Walks," or "This parrot is no more, it has ceased to be," etc, 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 quote upon quote upon quote. This show, as well as this troupe, are linked permanently together forever. A bit like how when I talked about Ghosts, which, by the way, I will be doing an updated review on, because I honestly feel like there's better things I could say about it at some point in the future, that I'm going to redo it, just because I feel like I have to. But to me, the thing that makes me laugh the most when it comes to Python is just the seriousness of it all. The way they treat it. In comedy, you have two very different sections. You have the sitcoms and you have the stand-up. Those are the two sections. Those are the ones that I mostly heard about. You have the stand-up comedian, which is sort of mostly, for me anyway, when I was growing up, it was mostly the likes of Lee Evans, Billy Connolly, Bill Bailey, Dylan Moran, occasionally, if I could find him on DVD. And other such comedians like that. Like, that's where they lived. And then Russell Howard and Jack Whitehall. And then over here on the sitcom side, you had the likes of, say, Miranda, Not Going Out, just stuff like that. Fawlty Towers. That was a sitcom-esque thing. But it wasn't. It was a comedy series. And I think this is where my interest in Python really is permanent. Comedy series, for lack of any other better term, has devolved over time. And the best way to explain it, as far as I'm concerned, is to look at the different ways that you see things when you watch TV as a kid to how you watch TV as an adult. Now, when you're a kid, when I was a kid anyway, certainly when I was growing up, there were various comedy shows, but they weren't filled with sketches. In America and in Canada, you would have that with the show All That, I think it's called, with a selection of random characters doing a bunch of random skits. The same two adults that were in the cast that did, that did like a group of, played all the adults across all the sketches, and then a series of kids that all did their own individual parts and whatnot over the course of the run of the show, and that was great. In America, it felt like the comedy troupe or the comedy team was more of a thing. In England, on the other hand, it's still there, but it didn't feel quite as prominent, if you will. A lot of what was in Britain's comedy stuff, especially when it came to kids stuff, the best way I can describe it is to refer back to an old CBBC program called Stupid. In that show, you had a guy who played called King Stupid, who resided in a giant castle and in the clouds, and occasionally he would pull a lever and he would watch, you know, kid actors and various other actors, you know, be they kid actors, be they grown-up actors, whatever, and they would do stupid things. For example, you know, for some people, your favourites might be stuff like this, you know, devil finger, you know, just very, very silly things like that. And while I don't remember a whole lot about Stupid, I remember it being very funny. And although I was a little bit past the time of watching, you know, little kid programs, Stupid was funny because it was filled with very short sketches that had not quite an overarching narrative, but had an overarching character at the very least, who was the cause of the problem. So would sit there and giggle to himself very stupidly, and not much else. But then when you reach adult status, you suddenly discover that a lot of the shows that you liked as a kid, especially the kind of shows that were kind of like this, like a season, group of comedy sketches, aren't as prominent. When you're a grown-up, a lot of it is sitcom-y stuff, drama stuff. There's an occasional comedy series, Fawlty Towers being one of them. But again, Fawlty Towers is not a series of sketches. Fawlty Towers is a story, and it's told, you know, 1 act through 3 acts. There's an actual narrative. You know, you have Basil Fawlty and his wife Sybil, and, you know, this Basil's wife, this Basil, this slap on head, whack, you know, all that good stuff. But the thing that made it interesting with Python is that it was a sketch show. And it broke up this, not by telling punchlines, but by giving off that level of animation that then transported you to the next sketch. But it wasn't an overarching narrative. And everything was different each and every time. Yes, the animation was the thing that linked them, and that could be considered an overarching force. But at the same time, you didn't mind that it was an overarching force because it was always so different. The thing when you have to remember is that when it comes to an overarching narrative between sketches in any show, be it kids or be it adults, whatever, or teenagers, there was always an overarching force. There was an overarching character, an overarching narrative, whatever. That did not exist with Python. And I think this was part of the reason for their success in the first place. And a lot of people agree with me on this, I would think. But the only other show I can think of that would have been a series of, I say a series of sketches, a series of jokes to each other mainly, is Mystery Science Theater 3000. You know, where you have these little moments between the main character and the 3 or 4 robots, depending on where you were in the series, what episodes you were watching. And then he would get zoomed down. He would be watching a really bad B movie, and they'd all be sat in the cinema making sarcastic comments. That's not really much of a sketch per se, but it was sort of like this difference between. It felt very much like a sketchy type show, a sketch type show, if you will. And I honestly feel like that's something that's really died, because it feels like everyone's trying to go for an overarching narrative. And while I am a fan of a narrative, and I am a fan of character work, and I'm a fan of narratives and characters and stories and plots and everything else, and I love all of that, Monty Python is this gigantic exception, because they took that idea and went, why? Why are we shackled to this concept? Why should we have to be shackled to this concept? And the only other group I can possibly think of that nearly went in that same direction was Mighty Boosh. Because the Boosh had, you know, characters that worked within the mainframe or whatever, but it was all a bunch of, you know, silly stuff happening on top of that. You know, you had the Mod Wolves, or, you know, you had, you know, Goth Juice, the greatest hairspray known to man, made from the tears of Robert Smith. You know, a very, very stupid set of random surreal moments. You know, a shaman and his monkey would go out on a stag do with a bunch of people from the Shaman Council. You know, with one dude called Tony Harrison, who looked like a small pink octopus, who sits there and says, you know, this is an outrage, a lot, you know, or whatever. And this stuff, all of this stuff is nicely linked, and it's beautifully done. And Python just has this way of linking it. But what really has Python done? Because if you think about it in any real way, at least the way people have reacted to Python, in the way of their comedy, it has been taken up. You know, things like saying, you know, silly, mundane things can be made into like this big, gigantic extravaganza, but they've never stolen the way the show is done. In America, they've tried. Over here, not so much. And that's weird. That's very weird. And again, I mean, I could be talking completely out of my arse. I have not looked at every possible show that's ever been put out by Britain at any one time, because I'm not that good. But at the same time, Python appears to be this very unique thing that has never been able to be recaptured. Or at least the Flying Circus isn't. The Pythons themselves have been able to recapture it, because as some people may know, in the 4th season there was no John Cleese. They got about halfway through the 4th season when the rest of Python turned to each other and said, we don't want to do this anymore without John. So they all sort of dissipated to the wind. And they joined up again to make the films later, you know, years later. But all of this stuff, when thrown together, is a lot of fun. And it's all very entertaining as a concept. To me, something that makes a good show a great show is your desire to imitate it. Or rather, your lack of desire to imitate it. And while I have just sat there and said, you know, no one really copies what Python's done, they copy maybe certain aspects of their comedy, but they haven't stolen their style of comedy, I think that's a really good thing. Because if you did, then you'd be seeing all these Python copycats all over the place, and that's just not how it should work. I mean, nowadays, in the, shall we say, the YouTube era, sketches are all over the place. And if you put them in a playlist, it's like watching an episode of a show or something with all the sketches put together. If you got like 2.5 minute or, you know, 5.5 minute sketches all, you know, throw them all together. If you put it under half an hour sort of mentality, you get a half an hour program. Very cool, very interesting. But it's all very entertaining and it's all very interesting and I love Python. I genuinely find myself all the time loving Python. And someone said to me not that long ago, an old friend of mine who I used to do a podcast with actually, called Half-Hearted Half Hour. If you end up on SoundCloud someday, you might find it. Just type it in, Half-Hearted Half Hour. But the thing that amuses me most about it is that my friend said to me something along the lines of going, it's the way they do it. It's the surrealism. It's the lack of punchline. It's the way they do it. It's the way they actually do the show. And I never quite got a full response out of him as to why. I think he just said that it was just something that he just didn't like, as it were, at the end of the day. And if that's true, and if that's the actual thing, that's fine. That's opinion. You can't change opinion. But to those people who sit there and say things like, you know, that it's lazy, that it's not, you know, a decent form, but I would just like to say this, that at one point in life, Stephen Fry, possibly regarded as one of the most, how should I say this, poshest of the posh to come out of Britain, has turned around and said that, you know, if anyone thinks swearing isn't a viable choice of an English language, is just a lunatic. You know, yes! You know, swearing is not a bad thing. By that same token, you can make that same argument. The idea is that, you know, if you don't think that it's a decent way of taking it from one show to another, let's just ask this. How many seasons of a show did your show have? How many fans did you gain out of this? How many live shows did you do because of this? Blah, 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 blah. Even Mighty Boosh, with its more overarching characters with Vince Noir and Howard Moon, as well as Naboo and Bolo, even they sometimes didn't even do a punchline to a sketch. It just ended with no real way forward. You know, for example, there's an episode, I think it's in the second season, where they end up talking about how to find a new sound for their band so that they can get signed. And Naboo tells them a whole story about a band that was trying to find a new sound, and they find it because it was inside them all along. And the ending is literally just Vince and Howard going, "How does that help us? We've got to go in 2 minutes, you monkeys. Just stay there. We'll do it on the way. Screw you, Naboo." And they walk out, and it's no answer to it. Not a thing. And it's like, yes. And you know what? This video may be short, mainly because I've not really been thinking about that much to review, to be honest, this week. I'll probably get more back into the swing of it next week. But you know what? I'm going to end this review in the same way that Holy Grail ended. With me sticking my hand in front of the camera and saying, "Alright, Sonny Jim, that's enough. That's enough. That's enough. Come on, lose it."